Hello and welcome to part 2 of Tutorial France, a series of videos for Europa Universalis 4 aimed at newer players, where I'll be walking through a campaign as France and showing you how some of the game works. So today I wanted to talk about what I typically do when starting a game, and an overview of our diplomatic situation and sort of pick our desired first target for our first war, because we're probably going to be going to war within a year or two at the very least. So there's a number of different ways in which you can get a handle on the diplomatic situation. That's always the first thing I do when I load into a new game, is try to get a sense of, well, who are my friends, who are my enemies, and what am I, where can I find allies to help me in my wars? Who am I going to be facing on the other side? And just get a sense of the lay of the land. So there's a number of ways you can do that. One of the first things I almost always do is check out my rivals and who I can rival and who has already rivaled me. Rivaling is a way that you can say that this country is not my friend, and we're going to compete with them in all things, and we like to beat them up, and they like to beat. Well, they may or may not want to beat us up back. Very often they will. But we're basically declaring that we don't like you, and we're going to make you suffer. So the AI will almost always have picked all its rivals before we even start the game, so we can take a look at who has decided that we are their frenemy. No, just their enemy. There are two ways to get the screen open. One is the diplomat screen for our nation. So we can either click on the kingdom, the shield icon to get the kingdom menu, and then go to the diplomacy tab and take a look at it. Or by far the easiest way to do this, and the way you will see me do it throughout this video series, is simply to right click on the country and it'll bring the same thing up. And if you wanted to see somebody else's diplomacy menu, you could right click on that country. So you'll see me do a lot of that, so expect it. So if we look at our diplomacy window, you can see this section here tells us who we have declared as rivals. Nobody, because we're driven by a player and the player hasn't actually picked these yet. And who has decided that they don't like us. So those are, not surprisingly, England and France. This is the time period just at the tail end of the 100 Years' War, and England and France had been fighting back and forth for 100 years. So yeah. So that's this. This shield is England. The next one over is Burgundy. Burgundy is this burgundy color. Hi, funny. Right here, as well as a number of these small guys that you can't really tell. It's not down here. It's that one and that one and that one and that. All belong to Burgundy, but not Barrois. That belongs to Provence. And there are rivals. Again, this is not surprising. England and Burgundy almost always rival France. They're all sort of competing for northern France, and due to the historicity of the situation, or I don't know, whatever the word is, the history, simple word. Due to the history of the situation in northern France, it's natural that they'll rivals. England and Burgundy will often rival each other also, so we ended up in a sort of three-way death match for France, which I will win. So Burgundy doesn't like us. And then this third flag is Provence. Provence is this weird scattered country that has Provence proper and a little bit of additional land. Anjou, I don't know quite what the history is behind Provence owning this and this. They also own Barrois, as I mentioned earlier, and they have as a partner Lorraine. So Lorraine will assist them in all their wars too. So Provence is a little bigger than they look. They're still not very threatening, and I'm actually surprised that they rivaled us. Usually, you can only rival countries that are a certain size, either be above or below you, and we may not even have been able to rival Provence, or we may not. We can in this case because they've rivaled us, and you can always return the favor. But if they had not rivaled us, we may not have been able to rival them because they're too small. You can always rival a bigger discrepancy up in size than you can down in size. So it's actually fortunate for us that Provence has decided to declare us their enemy, because it does let us rival them, and you get a benefit for beating up your rivals, and we're going to be beating up Provence to take that land anyway. So hey, look, free stuff! Right, so we also want to pick our rivals at this point. and that will help understand the diplomacy situation. I'm going to go ahead and set 2 of them immediately because we know we're going to be fighting England at some point to take this land, so we might as well just rival England to start. And yes, they're in the list. You can see that we actually only have a relatively limited selection of nations we can rival. There's something like 300 or 400 different nations in the world, some of which we've never met, so obviously we couldn't rival them. But we can't rival Sweden. They're either too small or they're too far away, probably too far away. And we don't really have any insight on why certain things, sometimes you'd think a nation would pop up here and it doesn't. We may get to the point where we have actually no valid rivals at all. So we're going to rival England, return the favor to them, and we're also going to rival Provence because, as I said, we're going to be beating them up anyway, so great. Sometimes before you set all of your rivals, you're going to want to take a look at who your likely friends are, and sometimes you can share a rival so that they're more likely to ally you with or something. So the next thing I'm going to do before I set that last rival is take a look at some of my possible targets for war, who doesn't like them, and who we can possibly get in as an ally. So we really have 5 options for war at the beginning of the game. We can fight England for these 4 provinces here, and then eventually for Calais up there. We won't be able to get that right off the bat, though. So England is one of the options. Brittany is this 4-province nation up here. They're pretty isolated, usually don't have very many good friends, so we could go after them. Provence, as I mentioned, has a bunch of land around us. And then Burgundy, as we said, is up here. And then this one little chunk, Avignon, belongs to the Papal State, which is mostly down here in Rome and environs, but also has Avignon as well. So those are our 5 possibilities. I'm going to eliminate the Papal State right away. I don't really want to tick off the Pope right now. In fact, I'd prefer not to tick off the Pope at all because I'd like to keep my relations with him up for at least the foreseeable future. And I may not have to. I may have to take Avignon eventually, but Provence wants it too, so Provence may take it away from the Pope. At which point I can beat Provence up for it, and the Pope won't care. So we're going to eliminate that one. I'm also going to eliminate Burgundy from initial consideration. They're not a good target to attack early for a handful of reasons. One is that they have all these little minor sort of partners that help them. That relationship is actually pretty strong at the beginning of the game because basically a united country, due to the way that the mechanics for the number of armies you can field and the manpower works, it's actually a unified country is weaker than a bunch of small countries occupying the same land, especially if they're clustered together. If they're far apart, you can often kill their armies in detail so that you get sort of back the benefit of that they get by having additional forces. But in here, they're all sort of clustered together. They're basically going to act as one country. That relationship makes them a little tough at the beginning, but that's a relatively fragile relationship, and it could well just poof on them within 15 or 20 years when the King of Burgundy dies. We're going to basically give them a chance to get weaker before we beat them up. Also, Burgundy generally makes very poor decisions about who to attack. They'll usually go attack somebody in the... this area here is called the Holy Roman Empire. We'll look at it in more detail later. But basically, that means that like half the Holy Roman Empire will be basically a big giant blob will be defending against Burgundian aggression. And that usually results in Burgundy getting smacked around. And I'd rather pounce on them when they're weak than when they're strong. Finally, another major reason for sort of ignoring Burgundy at the beginning of the game is that this game contains what are called dynamic historical events. These are events that occur based on triggers in the game that attempt to replicate things, usually important things, but sometimes relatively minor things, that actually happened in history. And one of those could very much work in our favor. There's a event for Burgundy called the King of Burgundy Dies, or the Burgundian Inheritance is what it's usually called. It's based on a historical situation where it's actually not it should be the Duke of Burgundy, not the King, because Burgundy's not a kingdom. Anyway, that correction aside, the last real-life Duke of Burgundy went off to fight the Swiss, got killed, had no heirs, and his dukedom got split between France and I believe Spain or Castile, whichever one it was at the time. So the Spain owned a bunch of land up here for a while, and France got all this part of of it that's actually French speaking, and that can happen in this game as well. If it isn't based on whether the King of Burgundy actually, or the Duke of Burgundy, sorry, whether the Duke of Burgundy actually has an heir, it can just trigger under certain circumstances, usually when Burgundy's losing a war badly. So, again, I'm going to give Burgundy the option to declare war on a big neighbor, get dogpiled, and get in a condition where that historical event can fire. And I may acquire all this land, not Barrois, but this land and all this land, without having to do a thing other than say, yes, I'd like that land, please. So we're going to eliminate Burgundy as the first target. That leaves Brittany and Provence and England. I'm also going to eliminate Brittany. I could deal with the fact that I don't care whether how pretty the borders look. Some people do call it border gore if you get your borders extended. I'm actually more worried about defending this land. England very much has naval superiority at the beginning of the game and will for at least for a while. So the only way I would have to get armies out to this land is through this Poitou, and if that gets taken, it's just I don't like extending my borders that way unless I have some other way of getting there. And with England having control of the seas, I just don't want to do that. So our two options are England and Provence, and they're both good options. So let's take a look at their situations and try to determine which one makes a better option to attack. So let's bring up the diplomatic menu for England, and you can see that they have decided they don't like me, which we saw already from my screen. They don't like Denmark, which is a little bit of an odd choice, and they also don't like Castile, and Castile doesn't like them either. Actually, more importantly is who their enemies are, and we declared them an enemy. Denmark declared them an enemy back. Again, I don't quite get why Denmark and England don't like each other, but they don't. But more importantly for us is Castile. That means that we're very likely to be able to get an alliance with Castile, and they will help us fight a war with England, which is good. We'll have both of our troops working against theirs. We can also see from this little indication here that they're allied with Portugal. Portugal is this green country right here, and that also makes the alliance, the possibility of being able to bring Castile into this very good, because that means that Castile will deal with Portugal's armies for us, and Portugal will probably never get to us. And we'll just have to deal with the English armies coming over from the British Isles. Spoiler alert, the AI is not terribly great at naval invasions. So that should be something we can deal with, even though England has an army that's mostly the same size as ours. So that makes England a relatively tempting target. Incidentally, for goal number 2 of colonization, it's actually a good thing if I can get Castile in a war where they're fighting Portugal. Castile and Portugal normally won't fight. They have what's called a historical friends relationship, where they've been friends for so long that they tend to look past betraying each other's alliances and not coming to war to support each other and all that kind of different stuff. But you can actually get them to lose that relationship if they meet in combat enough. I think it's a random die roll after each combat or something like that. So having Castile help me fight England and Portugal might mean that historical friend relationship would get dissolved, and that will slow both of them down in colonizing, because instead of cooperating, they'll be fighting each other, even if they're only sort of like just having to pay attention to their troops locally and allying each other. We'll benefit from that. So that's also good. Let's take a look at Provence now. Okay, Provence has 3 enemies and rivals that are the same people. They don't like Brittany, which is another reason not to attack Brittany. I could probably get Brittany to help me when I go attack Provence. And then they also don't like the Papal State, probably because they want Avignon. I imagine that's the only reason. I can't imagine they care about Rome. So we can expect Provence to fight with those people, and those would be logical allies if we're looking to go after Provence. I don't actually want to ally with the Pope either. I said I didn't want to fight him. I don't want to ally with him either. He's going to get in a number of wars down here in Italy that I really don't care about at this stage of the game. And basically, alliance is a two-way street. So if I ally with them, I have to go to help them, as well as expecting them to come help me. So we don't want to get involved in Italy yet. So we will not be allying the Pope. We might consider allying Brittany, but it's not nearly as juicy of an alliance as Castile. You do have a limited number of relationship slots. You can only have relationships with so many countries. You can go over that, but you start taking a penalty in diplomacy power for each one you're over that. And we're going to need lots and lots of diplomacy power for colonizing. Sounds unintuitive, but diplomacy power also is used for basically all naval tech and naval operations. So obviously colonizing requires a good navy, and we'll be using those points for that purpose, not for paying for additional relationships. So for a bang from the buck perspective, Castile's a much better ally to put in that slot than Brittany. That doesn't mean that we won't take Brittany also. It just means that, you know, potentially Castile is good. Another reason potentially to attack England at the beginning of the game is that England's actually relatively weak at the beginning of the game. They've got a terrible, terrible king. King Henry VI Lancaster, who's rated 0 in everything. This indicates how good your monarch is in those three categories, correspond to these three categories. And this actually is the number of points he generates per month. There's also a allotment of 3 that you get by default. So he's generating 0 extra for his country. By contrast, we've got a much better king. We've got a slightly above average king that has a 4 skill in administrative, a 4 skill in military, and a 2 in diplomacy. It's kind of unfortunate that he's weaker in diplomacy since that's what we need. But it's still way better than England. England also has a dynamic historical event, the War of the Roses, which will typically trigger within the first 5 years of the game, which causes him to have to fight a bunch of internal stuff. So he's going to be particularly weak because of that. Although I may not wait for the War of the Roses to fire before going to war if I pick him as my war target. So kind of leaning towards England at this point, I have to say. But let's look around at what allies we can get. So there's a couple of things that you can potentially do. One is the diplomatic map mode. That's this little bird icon on the far right of the map mode section. This will show us who our allies are. We've got none at the moment. It will also show us land that we have claims and cores on. Cores are lands that have belonged to us at some point in the past. We have more than sort of real legitimacy in owning. So such that if we took this land back, it would be considered liberating it, not like conquering it. This is good because it means we can take this land at much less cost in terms of actually winning victories, and it also means that the rest of the world will not really hate us much for taking our land back. They'll see it as something that is legitimate for us to do. You don't want to get too much of a reputation as a warmonger, or the entire continent will dogpile you. Because you are obviously evil and going to conquer them all, so they might as well beat you to the punch. That being said, it's an artificial system that you can game if you really want to, and we'll do a little bit of that. But anyway, cores on all this English land. So another strong indication that attacking England makes a lot of sense. We don't have any claims. I've looked around in a previous attempt at or sort of looking through the beginning of the game, and I didn't find any countries that had any obvious claims. That would be a yellow hatch instead of a green hatch. Claims are like cores, but a lot less strong. The land won't be cores. The land is automatically fully integrated into our kingdom as soon as we take it, as soon as we own it. We can conquer it in war, but until we've been given it into the peace treaty, we don't own it. But once we own it, it'll be immediately integrated into our country at pretty much full strength. Claims, you don't. It still gives you a legitimate reason to go to war, and it still reduces the amount of hate that the rest of the world gives you when you take it, but it's not as strong, and you still actually have to what's called core the land, which is basically integrating into your government and getting something out of it. Uncored land is mostly useless and also dangerous because rebellions will spawn there typically, or it generates unrest. So we don't have any claims. We will be manufacturing some throughout the game. So that is the diplomatic map mode. We can look at the diplomatic map mode for our other areas of interest by clicking on one of their provinces. So we can see that England has Portugal as an ally. They have a core on us in Armagnac, which means that they have a legitimate reason to go to war with us. I'm not quite sure why. I don't know if England ever did own Armagnac. It's possible. I know in the 13th century they owned a bunch of this land, but I'm not sure I understand quite why they have a core there. If we look at Provence has a core on Avignon, which is why they're rivaling the Pope. And they have a core on Dauphiné. They believe they should have Dauphiné, which explains probably why they rivaled us. They want their core back. Yeah, so that's the diplomatic map mode. That's mostly useful for understanding what your enemy's allies and possibly what land that they're interested in. Oh, something else I missed. This sort of teal, bluish green color. I guess that's the same thing as teal. Represents the minor partner. I talked about how uh, Provence had Lorraine as a sort of ally, minor ally. They're actually a what's called a personal union. That's one form of it. There's another one is vassalage, vassals. Um, this is actually most interesting if we look at Burgundy. And you can see that they have all this teal stuff. That's what I was talking about as this sort of whole host of additional things that will dogpile us if we attack Burgundy, or indeed if we attack any of this. If we attack Nevers, Nevers is really only these two things, but because they're a vassal of Burgundy, then Burgundy and all of Burgundy's friends will jump on us too. So that's why I didn't even call out Nevers as a target, because it really is part of Burgundy. It just isn't fully part of Burgundy, if that makes sense. So that's that. But right now we're actually looking for friends, so I'm going to use a different map mode. I'm going to use the opinion map mode, which you actually have to go into the second row for. And this shows colors indicating who likes who and who doesn't like who. We can see that England doesn't like us because of this kind of pinkish orange. We can see that Castile doesn't like England either. If you click on a country again, it recenters it around them. You can see that Portugal likes England because of this lighter green color. You can see that there's wide swaths of Europe that pretty much have the same opinion of all of us. That's because we are all Catholic, and you get a bonus for having the same religion. I didn't really go on this for the colors. I went on this mostly because I want to find people that are friendly to us. Every nation has a diplomatic stance towards every other nation. And one of the things we're looking for is friendly nations. So if we look over here, we can see that Austria is actually friendly. We could get the same information by going to their diplomacy screen and looking at the little icon next to the top number, and it tells us that the Austrian attitude towards France is friendly. We can see that the French attitude towards Austria is human. That means I get to decide what we think of them, not the computer. But that would be tedious. I mean, look at how many hundreds of countries there are. I probably only care about a few. But anyway, it's very nice to just be able to mouse over and see friendly. Milan is friendly. Savoy is threatened. Provence is rivalry. Oh, that's surprising. Castile also friendly. Yeah, that's a really good sign for alliance purposes. Portugal's neutral. Most of the countries far away will tend to be neutral. They basically just don't care if you even exist. Yeah. There's a few others as like domineering and protective, which big countries will use on small countries that they want to absorb later. We're way too big for anybody to have that opinion of us. Instead, we will see more and more threatened as we go through the game, as we get really big, and it becomes obvious to anybody small living nearby that we could crush them like a bug. So maybe natural. But basically, we were looking for friends because those are our likely ally targets. So Austria as a friend is a really, really good thing, and I'm not even going to think twice about that. They'll almost certainly accept an alliance. So let's go ahead and set that up. So I opened the diplomacy screen for Austria by right-clicking them, and I want an alliance, so it's something under alliance actions, and we have to offer it to them. They may or may not accept. If we take a look at, I don't know, Poland, Lithuania, whatever, you can see they won't accept the alliance. There's a checkbox there, and you can mouse over the check, and it'll tell you why. In this case, it's that they're neutral, so they just don't care enough, and that we're too far away from them. If we look at Austria instead, you'll see that they will accept the alliance, which theoretically it's a chance, but it says they will most likely accept. Realistically, if you have more positive reasons than negative reasons, and nothing changes between when you make the offer and when they receive the diplomat, which is 1 day, so generally nothing changes. They're always going to accept. So they're going to accept this alliance if I offer it, and we can look at why they will accept it. They give 50 positive reasons for friendly. That's enough right there. Just because they're friendly, they'll accept an alliance. They somehow think our navy is impressive, probably because it's Austria and they have basically no navy. They have no coastline. If we look here, you see they have no coastline. They have one little thing. So our navy looks strong to them, I guess. And they trust us. I'm not sure why. I think that's just game default at the beginning. And because we're France, we have a bonus to our diplomatic reputation. So they also want to ally with us for that reason. And the only reason they might think twice about allying with us, and not even think twice very long, is that our army is not really up to snuff compared to theirs. Although that's a little surprising. We have a pretty good army. So we're going to go ahead and send an offer of alliance to them. We do that, we just click on offer alliance, it'll ask us to confirm, and the bar sort of tells you what we're already looking at, which is will they accept. And I'm going to go ahead and send a diplomat. This alliance isn't actually formed yet. The diplomat has to get there first. So he's on his way to Wien, the capital of Austria, in order to offer that alliance. He always takes 1 day to travel there and offer the alliance, and then the days listing here is how long it'll take him to travel back. That'll actually update in 1 day, and it'll be 10 days again, and then it'll tick down from there. I'm not entirely sure how that works. Are we like flinging him via catapult so that he gets there in a day and then he actually has to walk back? Or I don't know what the mechanic is, but that's how it works. So we'll get that alliance as soon as I unpause the game. I'm also going to go ahead and offer an alliance to Castile for more or less the same reasons, actually even more reasons, and he's even more emphatic about it. He doesn't think our Navy is that impressive, but only moderately so. And he does think our Army is impressive, so I don't know what's up with Austria. You've got strange ideas, Austria. So we totally want to do this because Castile will aid us in a war with England. And that's, I think, yeah, let's just say that. That's going to be our first target. So we're going to go after England first. Austria probably will not help us against England because Austria doesn't like Burgundy, which is good news for us. That means they'll help us against Burgundy when we get around to that. They don't like Poland, which we don't care about, and they don't like Bohemia, which we also don't care about. That's these countries over here, which we won't be interacting with for a while. So yeah, Austria will help us with Burgundy, so we want them as an ally. We also want them as an ally for their general. The AI doesn't like to attack people that have strong allies because defensive calls, when you're attacked, allies will virtually always assist you unless they are bankrupt, have no army, have no manpower, or something similar to that, or they're in the middle of another war or something. They will almost always assist on a defensive call. Offensive, when you are declaring the war, generally allies have to have something in it for them. So in the case of Castile, something in it for them is that they get to beat up on somebody they don't like, and that's generally enough. If they had territory they wanted to reclaim, that would work too. Austria doesn't really want anything from England, so they're not going to participate in an offensive war. They might if I had 100 years of trust where I supported them in their wars and they supported me in their wars and we were best buds forever. Then they probably would help with England just because they see us as being awesome. But realistically, that's not something to count on. It could happen, but right. So this video is already very long, but we've got 2 allies that we picked up. Aragon's also friendly to us. I saw that earlier. We could get an alliance with them. I'm a little hesitant to do that. I'll think about that in between this video and the next, because Castile and Aragon, as you can see, are rivals. They're pretty much always rivals, and they will probably get into a war over often Navarre, and sometimes other things. But they'll generally end up fighting each other at some point in the first 20 years of the game. And I don't really want to get into a war fighting one of my friends, fighting for one of my friends against another one of my friends. That's not an efficient use of our resources. So Aragon maybe. The thing that is nice about them is they don't like Burgundy. And I'm eventually going to want to weaken Castile. I just don't think the timing's going to be right. Again, there's a dynamic historical event called the Iberian Wedding, where basically Castile and Aragon, the royal houses, will merge, and Castile will rule both nations. And when that happens, any relationship I had with Aragon's useless anyway, so it's not like it's just a temporary thing anyway. So unless I'm going to use them to attack Castile right off the bat, and I'm really not interested in doing that because I want Castile to help me against England, it doesn't make any sense to ally Aragon at this point. I think actually what I'm going to want to do, I might eventually consider allying Brittany, but I don't need to do that yet. They might get involved in a war while I don't want to be busy with them. We have 4 slots. One thing about France, it starts off guaranteeing Scotland. You'll notice there's only 1 of 4 here, even though we've offered alliances. Until the alliances are accepted, they don't count. But once they do, we would be at 3 out of 4 possible diplomatic relationships. So we start guaranteeing the independence of Scotland. That means that if somebody attacks Scotland directly, we will get called in to help Scotland defend itself. We will not get called if Scotland is an ally in a defensive war, but they're not directly attacked, or if Scotland attacks anybody offensively. Personally, I almost never use guarantees. I don't see them as very useful. They have some tactical usage, but they'd be much more interesting if they didn't take up a relationship slot. I'd almost always rather use a relationship slot on somebody that's actually going to help me fight an offensive war, because I'm pretty much never going to be fighting defensive wars after the first 20 years of the game. I'll be doing the attacking, not being the attack person. And I'd rather have an ally that can go in and conquer land, and then we'll get stronger and be a stronger ally, rather than somebody that's just going to sit there and get attacked. The only real use of it is if I wanted to vassalize them later, and Scotland's too big to vassalize, at least easily. So I probably will be canceling that. I might convert it to a full alliance, but I'm definitely not going to leave it as a guarantee. But I'm not necessarily going to do that just yet. So one last thing to do before wrapping up this particular video is a couple of other... Well, we forgot to set our last rival. So I don't think we need to set any... we reserved that last rival slot in case we needed to set common rivals. Castile will ally us without rivaling Aragon anyway, so there's no point in worrying about that. I'm definitely not interested in Morocco. Austria, we covered was these people, which aren't even stuff I can rival. I don't want to rival Aragon if I'm not actually going to attack them, because they'll hate me, and they might conceivably pounce on me sometime when I'm busy with something else. And generally, just you can't change your rival slots all that fast. So we know we're going to attack Burgundy in the long run. So Burgundy doesn't like us. So there you go, Burgundy. I don't like you either. All right, we now have all of our rivals set. And you'll notice the red alert in the left-hand in the alert section disappeared because it was telling us we didn't have rivals set. There's a penalty for not having your rivals set, so that went away. I'm somewhat interested in this Navarra territory here. As I said, Castile and Aragon might end up going to war for it, but if they don't, one of them will try to peacefully vassalize it as part of their country. I would also potentially like to do that. So I don't want to offer them an alliance yet, because if I offer them an alliance, then I'm compelled to defend them if somebody attacks them, and I don't want to go there. But I will send my free diplomat, Francois de Crèvecoeur, or whatever that is, to Navarre to start building our relationship with them. So we got a relationship of 25. We have to get it all the way up to 190 in order to vassalize them. So that's a lot of work. It may not happen. This may be a waste of time. If Aragon attacks them next week, then I'll be saying good luck. My diplomat's going to get recalled. But for now, we'll go ahead and start doing that. And then the last couple of things I want to do is I'd like to hire some advisors. So that's on the government tab, the far left tab in the kingdom menu, or you can actually click the empty chair icon, which is telling me that I've got advisors that I could hire. And I'd like to hire some advisors. Those will help with our generation of monarch points. You can see how many monarch points we generate right here. And we generate 3 base value, additional 4 because of our king's administrative skill, which is conveniently listed there. And then we lose 1 because we actually have a focus on diplomacy, which means that 1 point from administrative and 1 point from military is transferred to our diplomatic power pool. I'm actually fine with that. I could adjust that, but I'm actually fine with that because I'm going to need a lot of diplomatic power to get our colonization up. And we get 3 plus 2, our diplomatic skill plus 2, 1 from each of the other pools. And then military, we've got a base of 7. We're losing 2, 1 that's transferred to diplomacy, and another 1 because we've got an extra leader. That's what this is saying, and that'll go away soon enough when our leader dies. I usually find I have an abundance of military points by the second half of the game anyway, so I'm not all that worried about it. I can hire advisors that will increase the number of points we generate, so I'm going to do that. And we have there's a bunch of different options. They all have, well, there's 3 options at the moment. There are a bunch of different types of advisors. You can see we've got a artist, a philosopher, and a master of the mint. And they have a static bonus that doesn't depend on their level, and then they provide a set number of points. So these guys provide 2 points each month. This guy provides 1 point each month. At the beginning of the game, we don't really have the resources to afford the level 2 advisors, or God forbid, the level 3 advisors if we have any available. So we just don't have the income. It costs $4 a month. We have a grand total of $519 to spare. So we could hire 1 technically, but that wouldn't leave us any room for anything else. So we're going to be sticking to level 1s. So I'm going to hire this guy. He gives us 1 prestige point a year, which is moderately useless, but hey, an administrative point is an administrative point. Here we have 2 options. We can get a trade efficiency guy that will improve the money we make in trade, and another guy that will increase our spy offense. That will make our diplomats less likely to get caught when doing nefarious activities. I think the spy offense guy is a little underrated, and I don't know how much I'm going to be focusing on trade in this game. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the spy master. And then for military advisors, we have a guy that makes our forts better and a guy that improves our reinforcement speed. I really would have loved to get a discipline advisor at level 1. This guy's at level 2, and I can't afford him. But we will take the fort defense. I guess. Really, I just wanted level 1 advisors so that I could get more points per month. And you can see another alert disappeared as we did that. So I think that I'll wrap it up at this point. We've got our diplomats all sent up, and you can actually see in this envoy section that we now have 0 of 3 free diplomats because they're all busy with things. One guy's basically, the Navarre guy is just going to chill here until we either reach max relationships or I order him to come back. He'll just keep working every month to improve the relationship a little bit. And you can see it's improved by 4, and it can go up 96 more. And these guys are busy offering alliances. They'll be back relatively soon, once I unpause the game. Finally, the very last thing I wanted to do to check is the missions. Missions are short-term objectives that can give you small bonuses. They're a way in which the game tries to direct your short-term efforts to something productive. It's a sandbox game, so it's another thing that you can shoot for. So I will want to do one of these 3 things. I can reclaim Normandy, which I'm intending to do at some point. May not be my first target. I'm actually more interested in these 2 provinces because they're useful for colonization purposes. They get me a port closer to the Caribbean. These don't help with that. And if I do that, I get a bonus to prestige and manpower for 10 years. I can solidify our papal relations, which is a very good thing. Another reason why I didn't want to attack the Pope. And that will give us yearly papal influence. I'm not going to discuss what that is right now, but suffice it to say it's really good. Finally, we can improve our prestige, which means getting our prestige up to 50. It's at 4 right now. If we manage to do that, we get a free stability, which is really, really awesome. But I don't think we're going to be getting it to 50 that quickly. I'm not sure, but I don't think so. I think because we'll be winning some battles, but because of the way that the England-France war works, England will mostly cower its army over here and not present itself as a target to attack. And I don't get much or any prestige for winning siege victories. So we won't actually get much prestige in that initial war. So I'm going to actually pick solidify our papal relation. I'd like as much papal influence as possible. So that means that probably this first diplomat that gets back, I'll be sending him to the Papal States to chat up the Pope. Chat with the Pope Man. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and call it now. This was an exceptionally long video. Thank you for sticking with it and watching. And next time, I'll touch briefly on some of the economics of the game, and then we'll actually play. Unpause the game. How astonishing. Thank you all, and have a nice day.